after. Brilliant. Well, welcome everyone to this thematic breakout focused on supporting parents and teachers. This will be an interactive space where we'll have about, hopefully around 30 minutes to hear from the award winners, learn about their work and learn about this theme. And please do use the chat to share your thoughts and questions as you're listening. And we do have some time at the end, hopefully for Q&A, and I can support the chair in picking out things from the chat if your questions pop it in there. Remember, when we go back to the main room, we'd love to hear your offers of support and recommendations. So do keep note of this as we're listening. So without further ado, it is my absolute pleasure to introduce Andrea Silvain, who's the co-head teacher of School 360. Not sure I'm so sorry, my Zoom just completely closed and I thought, oh God, the whole call has shut down. Had a panic.
We're still here.
I was about to message being like, I think the Zoom. As I was saying, my great pleasure to hand over to Andrea Silvain, co-head teacher of School 360. Really cannot think of a better person to be talking about supporting parents and teachers. So over to you, Andrea.
Thank you, Tisha. A lovely introduction. As Tisha said, I'm Andrea Silvain. You can call me Andy Silvain if you'd like to. And I'm the co-head teacher of School 360. My co-head is Sarah Selesnyov. We are Big Education's brand new primary school that opened in September, just opened this September, with our first cohort of reception children. Our mission statement as a school is to think differently, learn together, and change the world. And that comes from our commitment as co-head teachers to social justice. That's what we're aligned on. We want to be able to provide experiences that help our children to feel empowered to not just be a part of the world, but to really take it on and to make changes. And we've worked really hard to recruit a founding team with exactly the same vision and alignment as us. We do this through a curriculum of the head, heart and hand, which means that we want to educate the whole child. We look at not just the academics and problem solving, but also the character development and the values, the way that we see the world, and probably most importantly, how we see ourselves within it. We balance that also with creativity and sports and teamwork and producing really beautiful work. But we like to think of our beautiful work as School 360 as the pupils that will leave us in year 6 to go on to secondary school. There are other schools within the trust. We have Surrey Square, and we also have School 21, where I also worked. It's a 4 to 18 school in East London, which also has a massive commitment to social justice and empowering young people. I was there as the deputy head of the middle school. So community is really important to us. And it's a real pleasure to be here talking about supporting teachers and parents, because as we know, we can't achieve that mission on our own. It needs to be together. And as a new school, it's been particularly important for us because we're looking at ways to really hear from our parents that have chosen us as a founding school, to really hear their voices and make sure that they are included. We want them to feel a part of the school that we are building, and we want our staff to feel the same. So supporting teachers and parents is a great theme for me to be here chairing with you this morning. So that is my welcome. I'd also like to invite the award winner from 2020, Innovation Award winner Nicole from Life Lessons, if she's on the call and able to. Hi Nicole, hello there. We'd love to hear from you. Have a short intro from you.
Sure, thank you very much. And yeah, lovely to be here. As Andrea mentioned, I'm a 2020 Innovation Award winner. And I'd love to just share a little bit about what we do and how it links in with these conversations this morning. So I'm co-founder of Life Lessons, and we're on a mission to create positive peer cultures in schools. And we do that through developing skills of empathy, of respect, of critical thinking, through kind of 3 ways as a whole school approach. Firstly, it's through peer-led really high quality video resources. So we film young people from different backgrounds, sexualities, genders, talking about lots of things related to relationships, sex, mental health. And then the second thing is through teacher training. I'll talk about that in a minute. And then the third thing is around developing oracy skills and having those times for discussion, linking to what Andrea was saying about developing the child as a whole, and now enabling young people to be able to talk about these tricky things. And from our, we've over the past year on the kind of innovation award, we've changed and developed, and one thing we've changed is around teacher training. And with teachers not having a lot of time, and especially around these topics of skills development, we've been working with teachers to develop mini kind of bite-sized 1-minute videos, peer-to-peer, so interviewing teachers, sharing their best practice, and teachers using that in terms of how to facilitate discussion, how to handle tricky conversations, how to have these kind of create these safe spaces in our classrooms. And we found that that's been really beneficial in terms of short ways to develop and help teachers. So I will hand over back to Andrea, and yeah, really look forward to an engaging session.
Thank you so much, Nicole. It was so interesting and lovely to hear about the importance of oracy, not just for the students, but also for protocols for teachers as well, which is excellent. So first, we would like to hear from Entrepreneurship Award winner Caroline from Kalisa.
Good morning. I'm delighted to be here. Thank you. So I'm Caroline. I'm head of training at Kalisa, and I'm delighted to be presenting our initiative to you. First of all, why it's needed. A couple of months ago, a parent approached a school that I work with in tears, asking how she could help her youngest daughter, who was 14, desperately sad and harming herself. The mother was at an absolute loss, in significant distress, and she was feeling powerless to help her daughter. And not a week later, another mother approached the same school, begging them to help her get through to her 15-year-old son, who's becoming increasingly violent, is in a gang, and is currently being groomed to run county lines. Again, his mother felt utterly powerless to help. And their children were understandably both finding it really difficult to continue engaging with school, which, as we know, can lead to a whole host of negative life outcomes. And this isn't just one isolated school. We're seeing this happen in nearly every city school across the UK. Now, both mothers that I was talking about had significant struggles with mental health themselves. In fact, children of parents who have difficulties with their own mental health are more likely to have a mental health difficulty themselves. Now, poor mental health as a parent impacts the individual, of course, but it also affects their children due to the feelings that accompany this, such as depression, anxiety, reduced confidence, lack of motivation, and low self-esteem. So our innovation is an ongoing 6-week parent wellbeing programme for all parents and carers. The programme will be a trauma-informed, creative, expressive model. We'll use stories, art, music, and creativity to explore common themes around emotional well-being as it relates to being a parent or a carer. Working systemically is one of Khalisa's core strategic goals. We already deliver programmes to young people directly, and we train the teachers and the professionals through our whole school approach as well. Now, the impact that we hope this will have, well, we hold as a foundational value that everyone in our programme is equal in status and worth. Our participants' emotions and voices are heard and honoured in a really safe and nurturing group environment. And this is really not a common experience in our society as a whole, and it's one that is so important to well-being. So we also aim to encourage a peer support network, which will happen organically from bringing in a group together, but also through these participants bringing their stories, their skills, or even food from their different cultures and different family groups. And finally, we are going to be measuring specific outcomes around parental self-efficacy, belief and hope, increase practical coping skills, reduce stress, and improved social and emotional skills such as resilience and co-regulation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Caroline, and congratulations. So powerful to listen to. Thank you.
Thank you.
So next we're going to hear from Stefan from Football Beyond Borders. If you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hello everyone, I'm Stefan from FEB. I'm just going to get started straight away. So I'm going to start with some stats as to the why of our initiative. So the Teacher Wellbeing Index in 2020 found that 74% of teachers had experienced a psychological, physical or behavioural symptom that they felt was due to their work. 57% of teachers said they wouldn't disclose a mental health difficulty with their employer. A 2021 NUS survey found that 1 in 5 teachers said they wouldn't plan on staying in teaching for more than 5 years. So my name's Stefan. As I said, I'm from FBB. I worked as a secondary school teacher for 7 years in inner London schools. I'm from inner London as well. I was raised in South East London. In my 7 years of teaching experience, despite having access to wonderful mentoring, continual CPD opportunities, never once did anybody give me an opportunity to access a space for me to work on how difficult I was finding the job and the emotional strain and pressure of the job. I also never had any opportunities really in any depth to discuss the relational challenges and difficulties that were often the most challenging part of the work, both with my colleagues and with the young people I work with, particularly those young people who'd experienced multiple adverse childhood experiences, complex childhood trauma. I left teaching to come over to FBB close to exhausted. I don't want to say burnout, but perhaps not too.
Well, I think Steph's just frozen for me, and I think possibly for everyone else.
Yeah.
I'll drop him a message to let him know that I think his connection might have dropped. Why don't we move on to Nadine and Ethan, Andrea, and then I can work with Steph to see if we can reconnect him.
Yeah, brilliant. If we move on to Nadine and Ethan, that'd be great. And then hopefully we can come back to Steph. So, welcome, Nadine.
Oh, good morning. My name is Nadine Bernard and I'm the founder of Aspiring Heads. And it is such an honour and a pleasure to share this space with you all. I will hand over to my husband and co-founder, Ethan Bernard, who will share the work that we are doing and intend to do to create the, fairer education for all.
Good morning, everyone. It's great to be here. So Aspiring Heads is a social enterprise challenging racial disparities in education. Yesterday, Gina highlighted that leadership is one of the core components of social change. However, when the face of leadership is underrepresented by certain groups, we risk seeing a biased opinion of change. Currently, only less than 2% of both head teachers and senior leaders in the UK are Black. With such a statistic, not only do we directly or indirectly promote an unfair education system, not only do we lack what I believe is a true sense of a unified collective vision, but we deny Black children the opportunity to see leaders that look like them. So, at Aspiring Heads, we want to see improved levels of representation in school leadership for Black teachers, which we believe will contribute to the long-term impact on decreasing racial imbalances among student achievement, attainment, and inclusion. Our approach is not to moan or to point fingers, but through proactiveness, we developed our current flagship program, which takes Black teachers on a 6-month journey of empowerment, which highlights the pitfalls, necessities, and key components of what it means to be a head teacher or leader in these current times. And these aspiring heads will be role models for the next generation. And I leave you with this. Representation not only matters for those who initially benefit, but for wider society long term. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Ethan. I love that. Could you just repeat that quote at the end? I'd love to hear it again.
Nah, no problem at all. They said, representation not only matters for those who initially benefit, but for wider society long term.
Thank you. So powerful. Really, really, really great to hear. And for myself as well, as a Black leader, new head teacher, it's, really exciting to hear what you're doing. So thank you, Nadine and Ethan. Did we manage to get Stefan back?
I think we're going to try one more time because we were poised to hear the rest. So Steph, back to you, and hopefully connection stays this time.
Tish, where did I get to? The internet in this shed is just shockingly bad. Sorry.
We just heard your brilliant intro, and you were talking about how, as a teacher yourself, you didn't want to use the term burnout, but that was that kind of move to FBB, and that's what we reached you.
And it's okay to carry on, is that all right? Thank you so much. Apologies, sorry about that for interrupting the flow. So yeah, so where I was. So I think what's really important about this initiative and what we believe at FBB is that we need to view schools through a relational lens, a relational perspective. The young people's behaviour doesn't occur in a vacuum. I'm sure we're all aware of that. We can't really separate the well-being of our young people in schools from the well-being of our teachers as well. And that's kind of core to this idea and the message. Touching on that briefly, some more stats. In 2019, 8,000 young people permanently excluded, 200,000 young people on fixed terms exclusion. Far too many young people, it would seem, teachers as well, are struggling to remain in our schools. So the what? Reflective practice groups. They are professionally facilitated spaces for teachers to reflect on professional and personal challenges that arise in the work. They're a chance for teachers to share best practice with one another in a non-judgmental and supportive environment. These groups really give teachers what I would say is quite a rare opportunity to move from a task-oriented headspace to one that's much more reflective and exploratory. The purpose being for teachers to develop their self-awareness, their interpersonal skills and coping mechanisms. And it's our belief and our experience so far, but that by working together in this way, peer bonds are strengthened, relational dynamics between staff and young people can be explored and strengthened too. And just in terms of impact, to finish, I've still got time. Terrible timekeeping. The idea being that once you provide these spaces for teachers to reflect in this way, it leads to better understandings of relational dynamics, including trauma dynamics and the experiences of young people who have experienced multiple adverse childhood experiences. This leads to a shift in the way that relationships are approached in the classroom and ultimately an impact on the most vulnerable young people. Also, the last thing I wanted to touch on, I added this in this morning. I was in a school in South London on Friday night running a reflective practice group with a senior leadership team who were sharing their experiences of a young person they'd had to talk down from the roof, jumping off. And I say it so candidly, it's difficult to say it another way, partly because of the time. So you can imagine how they feel. It's my clinical experience and common sense really tells me that it's absolutely essential that these teachers had a space to process what they'd gone through, not just for themselves, but also in order for them to make sure they followed up with the young person and with the different appropriate teams in the way most conducive to supporting that young person. It's actually astonishing to me that had they not have had that session with me, they might just not have had that opportunity to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Stefan. I'm really glad that we got you back and were able to hear the rest of that and grounded in some really shocking statistics as well. So thank you. We're going to move into some questions now. So I'd like to start off the panel discussion by asking a question to Caroline. And the question is, why is innovation needed in this area?
Okay, so I've got some stats for you. In the last 3 years, the Children's Society found that the likelihood of young people having a mental health problem has increased by 50%. 75% of young people with mental health problems aren't getting the help they need, and 34% of those who do get referred into NHS services are not accepted into treatment. So our current approach of offering interventions directly to the child clearly isn't working as well as it could. And with our 2020 COVID glasses on, NHS Digital 2020 research shows that children with a probable mental health condition are more likely to live in households that had fallen behind with bills, rent or mortgage during the pandemic. And that same report also measured family connectedness. So in 2021, 16% of 6 to 16-year-olds were living in a family with reported problems with functioning. And remember that emotional dysfunction, food insecurity, and mental illness all count as adverse childhood experiences. And the potential toxic stress that comes from these adverse childhood experiences can again lead to a whole host of negative life outcomes, an increased likelihood of circulatory diseases, cancers, respiratory diseases. And the majority of these are entirely preventable with a change in lifestyle. But this change in lifestyle is so hard to find due to the limiting impact of feelings such as depression, anxiety, and low self-esteem. So this is intergenerational trauma being passed through generations. It's not just unacceptable for those experiencing it, but also in a wider societal sense. 2020 research calculates that the total ACE attributable cost in England and Wales annually comes in at 42.8 billion. There are very few interventions available that focus solely on the parent as a human being and looking at their own emotional well-being first, which is the keystone of all trauma-informed approaches. As Dame Rachel said earlier, cradle to career, at least one parent or carer by default is usually in every home. Imagine the impact that we can have if we can support the parent's emotional well-being, which then supports their capacity to support their children and change this intergenerational cycle to one of positivity.
Thank you. Thank you, Caroline. What a great answer. I was trying to make notes of some of those statistics. Really, really interesting. Thank you. And I'd also like to ask another question to Stefan. What are some of the challenges in making progress in this area?
Thank you. Some of the challenges making progress in this area, one of the biggest ones, and I found this already, having been fortunate enough to have delivered about 25 of these sessions already across 6 different schools this term, is making time, really, which sounds simple, but actually I think is indicative of a much wider problem. It's very difficult, and I think it was Nicole mentioned it earlier, and I was really drawn to what you said there, Nicole. It's so difficult for teachers to find the time to actually to access these kind of spaces and to do this kind of work, especially where I'm working with senior leadership teams. There's such a sense of this being really needed for the teachers themselves, and because of the obvious implications for their work with the young people. But it's so difficult to find any of that time sort of to factor into their work day, really. I think viewed from a sort of broader political lens, there's something for me about I suppose the marketization of education, the constant pressure on teachers to or certainly in my own experience as a teacher, I should speak from the eye, to make sure I'm sort of meeting ALPS targets and various sort of pressures like that, which of course are important. I'm not in any way seeking to diminish the importance of young people leaving school with good results, but there's so much more to it than that. And I think the example I just gave a minute ago about the clear mental health need that seems to be increasing among young people at the moment and among teachers suggests that you have to, on a policy level and also on a kind of whole school cultural level, you have to make spaces and make time honouring the fact that it is extremely difficult to work as a teacher in any part of the country, but I would say especially in inner city schools where the challenges the young people face are more and more diverse, I would say.
Absolutely, thank you, Steph. And Ethan and Nadine, can I ask you a question? How can the sector support you in this area?
Okay, so there are 3 things that we feel that the sector can do to support us. So first is actually just acknowledging that there is an issue with the lack of Black representation in leadership. Black children do not often see Black leaders who look like them. And both Black and white children continue to risk developing a view that leadership is a white-only space. So acknowledge is the first. Secondly, awareness. We encourage and would love for everybody here to continue to raising the profile of this issue and sharing with others within your network. It's very often, obviously there's great leaders in schools, but we often do not necessarily proactively are thinking about the lack of Black representation. So awareness, raising the profile would be the second one. And 3, action for us. So action in terms of taking action to come forward and potentially support the work that we're doing, whether that is through offering to support with research, because there's quite a lot of research that has been done in America, but not so much done in England. So that would be really great. Sharing your resources, sharing your expertise. We clearly do not have all the answers, and we know the power of collective action And this we know is one of the FEA outcomes for this summit. And lastly, I would say we have a number of Black teachers who want to have, who have shown interest to take part on our Aspiring Heads program, but do not have the financial support, or the are finding themselves that they're blocked within their actual school that they're working in. So we're looking for people who will be happy to sponsor students, or even individuals who are very confident with creating funding bids and so forth, because myself and Ethan, as I said, we don't know all the answers and we don't have all the expertise. So if there's any of that within the room, we would really, really appreciate it. Thank you.
Nadine. Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. Tisha, I'm not sure if you've seen any other questions in the chat so that we can open the floor up more widely.
Yeah. Brilliant. We've got about 6 minutes to take some questions and reflections from the floor, and I've seen one come through from Janine. Janine, would you mind coming off mute and reading out your question for the room?
Yeah, sure. Hi. Very nice to meet you, and thank you all for the work that you're doing. Just feel so kind of heartened and inspired hearing about it. My question was again for Nadine and Ethan, just about the specific barriers that you see to Black teachers progressing into senior school leadership, and how you're kind of specifically targeting what you do towards those barriers, because the stats are shocking. They're bad for young people, they're bad for teachers. So what lies beneath that stat?
I'll take this one, Nadine. So far, Nadine and I, we've had the privilege of working with a number of Black teachers seeking to enter into leadership. And I'll say the first apparent barrier is that lack of investment, as Nadine put. We've had many teachers, say that they've approached their schools to want to do sort of more personal development, and it's been like, oh, sorry, there's no funding, or we don't think you need that. You're good enough in what you do already. The second is that they feel overlooked. They really do feel overlooked, and for various different reasons. And thirdly, that then leads to a sort of lack of confidence, and sometimes a lack of belief in themselves. So, what we've developed is to try and build that confidence, to sort of almost re-empower them to take ownership, take development into your own hands. And I would say probably 90% of the teachers that we've engaged on our program so far has been all self-funded. And props to the very few schools that have invested in their teachers. So yeah, that's some of the barriers.
Brilliant, thanks Ethan. I can also see Nicole popped her hand up. So Nicole, I'll come to you next.
Thanks, Tish. I had a kind of reflection that I was thinking about, and then I also had a question. Part of like some of the work that we've been doing, which we've just realized, and I think this is in terms of teachers and schools, but also parents, is ensuring the like flexibility within what we do, because every school is so different, making sure that there is that flexibility so that it works for different teachers in different schools and different parents in different areas, and that actually not trying to kind of pigeonhole something to fit within particular leaders' work. And so that's something that we've been developing so that our existing materials can fit within different contexts, and teachers can run with it how they want. And then I also had a question kind of off the back of the challenge that Stefan was talking about, and that something that we've found is it's so important to have this space for developing mental health, ensuring that teachers are supported with in terms of their mental health and their training. But have we seen really innovative, or I'd love to kind of hear more about other innovative solutions or ways in which we can create that space within a really packed timetable. Maybe some leaders on the call and also the innovators to share some of the things that they've seen.
I suppose I could respond. I had something that does come to mind very briefly. I think that I mentioned it before, but it is very difficult to get, not difficult, it can be difficult, I suppose, from a logistical point of view to factor that time into the day and to make that work. And what I'm finding already in schools is that it has to be something that is a real kind of whole school effort to kind of make those shifts. So if I think about a senior leadership team, another senior leadership team I'm working with at the moment, when I first started working with them, I'd have them in this group of 12 of them, and the tannoy would be going off the whole time, calling them away to come and do things. So they're just kind of opening up into this reflective practice space. And then they'd be like, could Mrs. So-and-so please come to reception? There's a member of the police force to see, or, you know, whatever, as a real example. And what they did eventually is they had to sit down as a whole staff team and say, on this time when we are in this space, because we value this and we see the importance of it, we are not available to be contacted. There are other people in the school who can do this. The power has to be devolved and shared. And I also think there's something really magical about that, because also it's about SLT teams, as I say, devolving that power and sharing that with other staff members as well. And hopefully kind of that's something that can be done on a rota. I could speak about that a bit longer, but I'm a bit of a waffler, so I'm going to stop.
Amazing. Thanks, Steph. I can see we've got 3 questions and 2 minutes. So I'll try and take them. I can see we've got Kieran, Loic and Gerald. We'll come to Kieran first, and then Loic, and then Gerald. But Loic, if you could also pop your question in the chat, just in case we don't get to it, then we can pick it up in the main room. So over to Kieran first for your question.
Great, thanks. Morning, everybody. I suppose it's a reflection that turned into a question, which is a lot of what we're hearing is that the narrowness of where education has become means that those fundamental parts of who we are and how we develop the other aspects of ourselves, rather than just a kind of very narrow knowledge base to pass examinations, is acting as a barrier in all sorts of ways. And I think that was a reflection for me on the leadership point as well, which is finance being a barrier to some. We're seeing loads of courses being made available to teachers and leaders for free, but they are a narrow sense. It's the MPQ. I always mess up the acronyms, but the MPQ, all of those. And actually, I feel that there's a real appetite within the sector for that wider personal development, and there's not enough attention being paid to that, so that leaders can say to members within their, to their staff, yes, of course, money isn't a barrier, we can pick up the time. So I suppose it's just, how do we get the points that everybody in the room believes in terms of the bigger aspects of students and teachers, who we are as well as what we know. How do we get that more a priority for others to then help remove some of the barriers that I'm hearing, particularly on when it comes to supporting other routes to leadership? That's all.
Well, thanks, Kieran. Ethan, I see you come off mute.
Yeah, I'll jump in on that. Thanks for that, Kieran. I think to make it a priority, we just need to just keep talking about it. We need to keep shouting. Sometimes you see that change need to happen, and internally we're like, something really needs to be done, but we don't really make big noise or big fuss about it. We need to just keep shouting from the rooftops and just keep putting it at the top of the agenda. So for an example, with Nadine and I and Aspiring Heads, for a while, we realized, okay, there's an issue with a lack of Black representation, but we noticed there's quite a lot of individuals or organizations that don't want to get caught up with any issues to do with race because they don't want to make any mistakes, where we're like, you know what, we're going to jump straight in. We haven't got all the answers, but we're going to make a start. And regardless of what anyone says, regardless of some of the abuse that we've already received for it, we're going to keep it going. So I encourage to make those things a priority. We've got to keep shouting about it.
Thank you, Ethan. We're about to be pulled